The infamous CECOT mega prison, otherwise known as the Terrorist Confinement Center, is an absolute beauty to marvel at least not to the 14,532 inmates all detained inside this maximum security prison. Unlike other maximum security prisons around the world, this particular prison was erected just 2 years ago after El Salvador experienced the most deadly day in its entire history, as gang violence broke out and over 60 individuals lost their lives, including a high percentage of innocents on the receiving end of this violence. It infuriated the government and the president, Nayib Bukele, and he had had it up to the throat with the gang troubles. As a result, and in an attempt to ensure public safety, he called for a state of exception, enabling the government to suspend certain laws and some constitutional rights. After this, they proceeded to carry out a mass sweep of suspected and verified gang members in the state, gathering up to 55,000 suspects. So, in an attempt to relieve the already overcrowded prisons in the state, they announced the building of this futuristic Alcatraz in late 2022. Oh well, that's outside information. Why don't we delve into the actual prison and see all about CECOT prison? Did President Bukele manage to get the kind of security he wanted? Want to find out? Explore the contents of this video with me as we are taken on a tour of the establishment housing the most violent gang leaders in El Salvador. Located in a highly controlled zone, just an hour away from the state's capital, San Salvador, with a roadblock about 3 kilometers away from the main facility, the inspections and checks are strict to the core as security is top-notch in this facility. 200 meters after the checkpoint, the jammers put in place all around the facility block out every signal. Communication is heavily restricted to prevent these gangs from ordering murders from inside the cell. As we see in movies, a drug lord in prison can still run a mega cartel successfully. Well, it actually happens. Within a 2-kilometer radius, no telephone communication can be sent or received. When they reached the entrance of the facility, the fence of the establishment was a staggering 11 meters in height, made of tough, reinforced concrete capable of repelling attacks from even armored tanks, a literal, immovable object. Tools of defense embedded into the CECOT prison include 19 watchtowers, guards armed with assault rifles on every watchtower, and a 15,000-volt electric wire fence. This fence would fry anything that has blood, much more than Kevin did to Marv in Home Alone 2. All these features and characteristics alongside cutting-edge technologies put in place make this prison nothing less than a fortress. Since 2019, when Nayib Bukele was elected president of El Salvador, the crime rate in the state has reduced drastically. However, he has been criticized by a number of individuals for violating human rights in the state while rounding up the suspected gangs and their members. El Salvador used to be one of the most dangerous countries in the world, but now, as charts show, El Salvador is even safer than the United States and Canada. As it stands, that's pretty crazy though. I mean, even in football, these countries in the Americas do not play fair. They run a tight security system here, and unlike every other prison in the world, in this CECOT, reporters can't just come in whenever they want to film and do whatnot. That's why, when getting through the checkpoint just before the entrance, they had to show proof of entry and their passports too. Only 5 companies were allowed to film the life inside the CECOT prison, 1 from Africa, Asia, the Americas, Australia, and Europe, basically 1 from each continent of the world. They had specific security guidelines, and even inside the building, you still had to go through a couple of other checks to make sure you weren't bringing anything extra in, not to mention the lack of network service in the establishment. Like children going on a school excursion trip, they all marched in and were about to be shown the abode of the most notorious criminals in El Salvador who have been wreaking havoc for some time now. And as in any museum, this prison had its own guide, which in this case was the warden of CECOT, a man of guts, I must say, staying with notorious gang leaders every single day. Heaven knows I would have retired by then. My kids still love me. But the facility was so secure that the fear of any prisoner getting out was the least of their worries. He went on to state that the CECOT facility houses the worst of the very worst, in his own terms, emphasizing the fact that they were the worst of the very worst after committing several kinds of crimes, continually terrorizing the locals and inhabitants of El Salvador. Furthermore, some of the criminals here, if not all, are facing thousands of years imprisonment, which is just a metaphor stating they are here for life. President Buchel wasn't playing dog. And then, finally, there was one more check we had to go through before seeing the prisoners, and this one would literally blow your mind. We have metal detectors. Yeah, all good and fine. But the extra measure the facility took to make sure no one brings anything inside here is just crazy. There's a scanner that would literally check every place in your body, spotting anything that isn't supposed to be there. The reason why they have this, the warden stated, is that some visitors, or better still terrorists that come to visit, hide items in their mouth or, even worse, inside their butthole or private parts. Ew, I know, right? Well, they do it, and the item manages to pass through and gets to the prisoners, but never again, as they have shut down any and every avenue for that to even happen. So no drugs for you again, Mario. Well then, finally, they were on their way to see the detention cells. Fun fact, there are 10,000 members of the Mara's gang. Hold up, did I say 10,000? I meant 12,000. That's a lot of inmates though, really notorious criminals, including gang leaders. Gang leaders of some of the most notorious gangs in El Salvador. Starting off in the prison's 8th wing, where the gang leaders were placed, the most dangerous and scariest looking personas, with tattoos covering every inch of their bodies. You don't need a John Johns to tell you that these guys were really the worst of the worst. The two most notorious gangs in El Salvador, MS-13 and Barrios 18, had their leaders asked to step forward and take off their tops. The warden stated that, in loyalty to the gang, they draw all these tattoos over their entire bodies, even on their faces and heads. That's got to hurt though. With MS standing for Mara Salvatrucha and Barrios being, well, Barrios. These two gangs are the most powerful and always fought for control over the state, slaughtering and victimizing opposing sides, similar to the football matches every season between Barcelona and Real Madrid, with each side fighting for bragging rights as the best in the country. But in this case, they were murdering and brutalizing each other, now forced to live together in a very confined space. The warden was asked if fights don't break out a number of times in the cell. Similar to the housing unit used in the reality show Squid Game, all these men were placed in a hall-sized cell. Two rival gangs, attacking each other when they were at a distance, now literally at arm's length. Of course, there would be brawls. But the warden gave a rather satisfying response, stating that they have surveillance cameras literally everywhere in the cell and its environs, guards at every entrance and covering every wing, monitoring and watching them when they sleep and possibly any other wise acts. All this approximates to about 40 armed guards in every wing. Stated by the warden, the maximum capacity of inmates in a cell is approximately 80 inmates per cell, but some have less while some have more, all depending on the size of the cell. Getting to look these inmates in the eyes, it's as if you can see no compassion in them, as they are believed to be utterly ruthless and mean. At least every inmate in the CECOT facility has been the reason for the death of at least one, if not 5 or more humans, whether they be innocent or guilty. The treatment they get is rather harsh, but based on the crimes these men have committed, most people will be of the opinion that they should rot, as all of them are actually going to rot. The warden stated earlier that once an inmate goes through that main cell door, there's no going back. And once they're inside the cell, there's no freedom, not even to take their bath or excrete and all that. There's no privacy at all. You'd have to do your business with everyone watching. It's a really terrifying scene though, a real prison and a half with metal bunks, no bed, no blankets, just steel, with a concrete tub filled with water that they use to take their bath. Don't go to prison, kids, and don't do drugs. And you think that's bad? Wait to see what CECOT has for stubborn inmates. A 3 by 2 meter cell, so cramped and uncomfortable enough for anything living and breathing, called the disciplinary cell. It features a concrete bed, a water basin, and a toilet. But hey, think about it. They wouldn't get to share the toilet with fellow inmates. However, a room where the only source of light is a cork-sized opening in the roof is far from comfortable. Some of the inmates who get in fights with guards, especially, are confined to this space. And even worse, those who refuse to cooperate at all can spend up to 15 days in there. And per feeding, the warden stated that they feed the inmates 3 times a day, which is the basic morning, afternoon, and nighttime schedule. The type of food they feed them includes, in the morning, they serve beans, cheese, or cream alongside 2 tortillas. In the afternoon, a portion of rice, spaghetti, 2 tortillas, and a drink. When asked if they are given any kind of meat or whatever, the warden responded, "There doesn't exist a menu that has meat or chicken for a person deprived of freedom." That's pretty deep. Remind me not to go to jail. Remember, the warden mentioned countlessly, any inmate that comes in here would not be able to leave, ever. While sentenced to life imprisonment, the lives of the inmates are still valued, as they are treated on a regular basis. Whenever they are reported sick, the cameras could record as the inmates were being handed medications to relieve them of whatever ailment suffices. During the 1-hour break, we could see the inmates participating in religious activities, as the warden believes their path to redemption should be complete, allowing them to reflect on their sins and give their lives to Christ. We could see them singing a couple of hymns in unison. It was a really nice moment. Sometimes, they also take part in aerobics exercises to keep fit. In addition, we had 10 minutes to talk to one of the inmates. He spoke about how they were being treated well and all that, and he also said he believes everyone deserves second chances, which I also agree on. However, President Bukele and those affected by the activities of the gang members prefer they remain in CECOT. While the guards were looking away, one of the inmates started speaking to us, claiming he was wrongly accused and was not part of any gang. He was just arrested. Furthermore, he stated the harsh and brutal treatment they were receiving from the warden and his guards. He didn't look happy though. The warden felt he had been somewhat exposed. I can't really say more, but that's all for now. Oh, and also, if the inmates ever think of escaping or revolting, there's an armory stacked with assault rifles of all sizes, with rubber and real bullets. So Pedro, before you try to escape from here, think again. What do you think of this facility? Brutality or justice? Why don't you let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, as similar content will be coming your way. Adios, amigo.